Well, yeah. So let's take that example that you started, and let's dive deeper into that, because I think a very kind of an easy to digest example that we think about as even introductory finance students is the story of some entrepreneur who has an idea, starts a business, manages and grows that business, and then ultimately either takes it public or sells it to some strategic buyer. And so this is a journey, right? This is the journey of a certain type of firm. What are some critical places in that journey? And I imagine you're going to say the very beginning, but what are some critical places in that journey that an attorney or a group of attorneys really fit?
Yeah, so the first place is really the business planning exercise in the beginning. So we lawyers like to call this space choice of entity. When a client comes to us and says, I have a business idea, or I'm forming a business, or I have this person who wants to work with me and we need to do this. I mean, you don't have to form a business entity, right, to do this. There could just be a contractual relationship between you and that person. So the first thing that we evaluate is, what is this? You know, is this a business? Is this a project? Is this a contractual relationship, or is this a business association? Who's going to be involved? So we ask a lot of questions at that stage to help that person define not just where they are today and where their thoughts are today, but in particular, as a corporate finance lawyer, I think about tomorrow. How is this business fundable, not just today, but on an ongoing basis? Is it going to fund itself through its operations, or is it going to need infusions of capital? And if so, at what stages and in what forms? Because that's going to help me to determine, you know, whether they do want to form a business entity and whether that entity is going to be a corporation. And if it's a corporation, is it going to be a C corporation because that's has a special tax status, or an S corporation with a different tax status, or is it going to be a limited liability company and what tax ramifications relate to that, or a partnership? Or you're just going to run this as a sole proprietorship, right? Which is where you use the contracts. And partnerships can come in different flavors: limited partnerships, limited liability partnerships, limited liability, limited partnerships, regular old partnerships, you name it. We got them all. So there are lots of different things. And now we have things called a benefit corporation for those people who are interested in forming social enterprise businesses that serve more than a single bottom line. More than the financial bottom line. They might serve an environmental or social purpose as well. So there are many forms of business entity out there and many ways to play those different forms. So that's one easy area where lawyers can make a big difference, I think.
Well, I think it's, I don't want to open up too much of a can of worms here, but I think it's very tempting for many early on to just view things like you're talking about is just sort of boxes to check. Like, okay, I'm going to start a business, so I've just got to I need a checking account, and in order to get a checking account, I've got to have some sort of a name for a company, and maybe I need to form some entity. So I'm just going to go to an online service and pay, a small sum of money, and all of a sudden just kind of get it done. Very tempting, I think, when someone's sort of on their journey, but it sounds to me like that type of choice, even with a very, very small business, can have long-term and far-reaching consequences.
Yeah, sometimes you can get lucky and just pick the right one and make it easily morphable, right? I mean, I'm not going to lie about that. People form businesses online and they make it, right? But they usually change a lot during the course of things. So, I mentioned venture capital funding earlier in our chat today, and venture capital investors typically invest only in C corporations. It would be nice to know, if you're thinking of venture capital funding, that that's the case, right? Yeah. That by forming an LLC on LegalZoom, you're then going to have to completely change your form of entity and the taxation that is associated with it, right? Which can create costs. There are transaction costs. I mean, so this is where law and economics sort of fuse into each other a little bit, with finance also sort of engaged. You have to understand what the transaction costs are of what you're doing. And I think anybody who doesn't do that, and entrepreneurs, I get it. I've worked with them a lot. They're very gung ho. They're like ready to start now, and they don't want you to slow them down. And so the good business transactional lawyer that works with entrepreneurs tries not to slow them down and can shortcut some of the decision making a little bit for them, but needs to be somebody who has experience in that space to be able to do that, which means you're going to pay probably a little bit more money for them. And entrepreneurs also do not like paying for services.
But like you said, pay me now or pay me later.
But that is the case. Yeah, I mean, that really is the case, that that if you get good advice on the front end and you have to give them the right information, because lawyers make their decisions for you and help. Well, they don't make them for you, but they tell you how you can make a good decision. Only if you give them the right information. If you don't give them enough information, then our advice is crap, just between you and me, to put it mildly and crudely.
Yeah. So just shifting gears just a minute. There's all sorts of legal topics that I know in your head, they're kind of right there or just on the horizon in the world that we live in today. So what are a few of those hot topics that are just coming into the mainstream right now?
Yeah, I mean, the old ones in the life cycle of the business, that starts with that kind of advice I was just talking about, like, do you merge with somebody? Are you acquired by somebody? Do you continue to operate on your own? Do you dissolve the firm, right? Those are always hot topics, right? But there are some, I mean, I love the GameStop meme stock thing, which lawyers and law professors have gotten involved in. That to me is one of the most interesting hot topics that's sort of come out of the COVID crisis, all of us working online. And it's created consternation at all different levels. There are business lawyers that work with, for example, with the exchanges and the platforms through which people do their trading. And that's its whole other sort of complex and interesting area, and the clearance houses that were involved in a lot of this activity around GameStop. But just the concept that people aren't necessarily buying stock based on its fundamental value, that may sound like that's just a finance or accounting thing, but that's a law thing too. We've got to worry about that, because the law really tries to meet the expectations of reasonable people, because it's trying to get people to go into business with each other. That's, all these business entities and the securities laws are there to basically enable people to go into business with each other and fund their businesses in a way where the fewest people are damaged along the way. And so, so things like GameStop have sort of turned our world upside down a little bit, asking us to think about investors in a new way, asking us to think about the firms that are being funded in a new way. And the legal rules, there are hearings going on in Congress right now. The legal rules may change as a result of that. I also mentioned crowdfunding earlier. I think the innovations in internet finance, which crowdfunding is sort of one little branch of, have been huge in the last 10 years in particular, and they're still evolving. The creativity, it used to be creativity only around the instruments of finance. So, you've got stock and you've got debt, and then you've got hybrids, and then you've got other, because there are all these things that don't quite fit into any of those boxes that people have created. So that was, something that really was already going about 10 years ago. But now just the number of different kinds of financing transactions you can do and the different regulations that apply to them are basically growing all the time. People thinking of how to tweak this or how to tweak that. And sometimes it's just amending existing rules, but sometimes, as with crowdfunding, it's introducing a whole new way of doing things to facilitate those kinds of financing transactions. I mean, I may be a rule nerd, but I'm also I get incredibly excited about this stuff because I like funding business. I mean, the reason why I do this is because I think that businesses deserve more funding. And so the more we can open up the space, the better we are. I don't think Congress always makes wise decisions. So the other thing to fuse this conversation with is the sort of the political realm, which is that these rules that I'm working with are made by Congress and or by the Securities and Exchange Commission, both of which have some political engagement. For some people, that's really depressing. I find that a little exciting too, because you've got to figure out what the easy button is of the authority that you're working with in order to get the law, if you're interested in law reform, as I often am, in order to get the law to move in a particular direction. And lawyers play a really strong role in that, not just law academics. So I think there's a lot out there. And obviously in mergers and acquisitions, there always are new technologies that are being developed to new ways of fusing businesses, new changes in the accounting rules to facilitate that. And it's a very moving field. There's nothing static about practicing corporate finance law, and anything that connects to it, which is mostly everything if you're working with businesses.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, this is just sort of fundamental to the way the world around us works, or the way the world is evolving. And so one last question, and this one is very practical and very almost immediate for some of my students. So let's just suppose a 20-year-old finance major is, we've got a sophomore or a junior in college, is thinking about law school somewhat seriously. What are the next steps for that student?
So they don't want to hear the first step, right? So everybody can just plug their ears if they don't want to hear this, but get good grades. Sorry, but get good grades in all your courses.
So it matters. Grades matter.
Grades matter. So there are two things that matter.
Good enough.
Admissions, right, is grades, and for the law schools that require them, entrance exams. So you do have to take an entrance exam. The LSAT is the standard bearer, but there are some schools that are now taking a GRE, and there are some schools that are saying, for some people, we'll just let you skip it. Don't count on the skip it part, even though we all hate standardized tests. I mean, let's face it, whether you do well on them or don't, they're a pain in the butt, and they're not as directly related as we'd like to what you want to do. So that's important.
That's part of the game. I mean, it's
no doubt that is the game, right? Grades and LSAT scores are the game, and there are good prep services and everything like that. Talk to somebody who's taken one recently, and I think you get pretty good advice from that kind of a person. Go visit some law schools. They are different. Their curricula are different. The first year is pretty standard, but like ours throws some things in, like this business transactions class that I was talking about before, that other schools don't have. It tells you a little bit about the culture of a law school as to what they put in their first year curriculum that's not required by the American Bar Association, which certifies all of our schools. Basically, we have a separate process. We have to meet with them and not just with the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. So 2 accreditation processes. So that's important. And set up time. So the law school should take you to classes, meet the students there. Are they the kind of people you'd like to study with? Right. I mean, it's a very grueling program for 3 years. And we reteach you to think in the first year, which is not fun. I can assure you. So that being the case, you want to be in a place where you feel like the faculty, the administration and staff, and the students are supportive, the kind of people that you want to work with. Read and write. That's what lawyers do. We read with intentionality, and we write and we speak. So, the more, most of us speak most of our days, but so the more you can read and write in your undergraduate program, the better off you're going to be. Precise writing that's grammatically correct, yes, and has punctuation, yes, and good spelling and all of that, but also that's well structured. So that the paragraphs are well structured. I know I'm taking you back to like studying for the SATs, right, when you were in high school and you had to structure those essays. But seriously, That's the point of the realm for lawyers, is that efficient communication we were talking about before. And last but not least, get some mentors. You really need them, whether they're people who are junior lawyers or people who are already in law school ahead of you, people who can help you when the times get rough. Really, really important. And that's through the application process, as well as obviously when you hit law school. And, I'll open myself up to, I'm not going to proselytize about UT. I'll tell you what's good about our program and what isn't. But if anyone who's watching this wants to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to grab a cup of coffee with you at the Golden Roast or at the UC, and Starbucks or whatever. My daughter works for Starbucks, so I'll give a plug for them. But, just to sit down and chat, or even just have a Zoom conversation or a conversation in my office. I do have a Keurig there. The coffee's not as good, but you can come over anytime. And just talk about law school and what it might mean for you, because there are lots of great programs for finance lawyers. And I want to make sure the right people go to law school, and that they go to a law school that's good for them.
Fit is key.
In
so many things. Well, I know your story was you went straight from undergrad into law school. Do you recommend that for our students right now?
So that's a very personal decision. I'll say this from the teaching standpoint. I believe that students who have had some experience in working, whether that is significant experience while they're in school, or post-graduation from an undergraduate program do better in law school. They're more well-adjusted, they have more perspective on things, and military professionals included. So, if there are any folks out there who are military professionals, we love our military students. They are very well disciplined, as you might expect, in their thought and in their behavior, and that's really welcomed in law school. But same with, like, if you do philosophy or math, if those are fun things for you, those are great things because they train you to think in a different way too. So dollars to donuts, if you've had some experience in that kind of stuff, you could more easily sort of switch your thinking pattern to law school. So both, I think, academic stuff and work stuff help. And I think the longer you're out, just the more perspective you have. But I went straight through. I think I'm pretty successful. That most of my students go straight through. We're used to that, and it just may mean that you'll hit a few more bumps in the road, and have to adjust and have to learn a different kind of judgment about things. Triaging things will look different for you than it would look for somebody who's had 3, 5, 10 years of experience.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Joan. Really appreciate it. There's so many different avenues we could take this later. And so I'm definitely going to be calling on you again. Thanks for talking with us.
Yeah, really appreciate it.